Aspiring journalist Pete Heidi, and I'm guessing at the name pronunciation it's Hidy, convinced his mentor, Jim Laysenring, to publish The Art of Tying the Wet Fly. That was 1941. Mike Valla suggests that that book saved the wet fly from, not really from extinction because it was still being fished, but from its decline in use, particularly, I suppose, in the east coast of the United States. Laysenring was pretty particular about the ingredients in his flies. This old blue dun uses just 3 rusty dun hackle fibers for the tail. For the rib, he used buttonhole twist. I do not have any buttonhole twist. I was able to find buttonhole twist online, a lot of vintage buttonhole twist, but no yellow. And the yellow that I found is some new stuff, but for $7 for a little spool just seemed a little bit pricey to me. So I've twisted a single strand of yellow thread so that it kind of mimics the buttonhole, a single strand of buttonhole. Maybe not quite as heavy, but I think I'll get the same look. So if you really want to be anatomically correct with this fly, you need to use buttonhole twist. He had a particular way of putting his body material on the body of the fly, kind of a dubbing loop. I'm going to do a dubbing loop, although his was it was 2 strands of well-waxed thread that he rolled together with the dubbing material on his thigh. I'm going to do a dubbing loop. I get, I think, a similar look in a more modern method, although the purists in the Laysenring camp do follow his method. I am taking my thread out of the way, putting a single whip knot to take the thread out of the way so it doesn't come off the end of the hook on my cradle, so I can use the rotary function of the vise. And I'm going to put some extra, this is a wax thread, but I'm going to put some extra wax on it. And I'm doing that so that it will hold the muskrat fur that I will be using for the body. Just need to split that thread a little bit so that I can get the muskrat fur between it. And what I have done is just clipped muskrat fur off the chin of a muskrat pelt. Hopefully that wax will hold it between the 2 threads in my loop. I want to start fairly sparse at the top of my loop and then build a little bit thicker as I move down the loop. Try to get those hairs between the 2 threads so that they'll spin up nice to create the body. I think I probably have enough, so I'll just spin my spinner and get that hair to tighten up between the 2 threads. What Laysenring did was he would create these rolled thread and fiber strands and then just set them aside for later use. I'll just take my loop up above my hook and then use the rotary function of my vise. It's a little bit harder if you don't have a rotary vise, but it can be done. And then I do want some of that yellow thread to show through at the end of the body, right there where the tail begins, and that may be about enough. And I'll go ahead and tie it off there. Get my cradle out of the way, wind thread back up my bobbin so that it's not so long. My spinner came off my loop, and so I'm holding that tight to keep it from unwrapping. And I'm just going to wrap back away from that eye of that hook because I do need space to tie in my front hackle. Go ahead and clip out that thread, and then I'll take my fake buttonhole twist and wrap a spiral rib. I can see the yellow showing through a little bit. That's all you really need. And then I'll tie that off. I do 3 wraps over the top, and then 3 wraps, 2 or 3 wraps underneath to catch it in, and then I can clip out the rib thread. For the front hackle, I'm going to be using these hen feathers. I'm hoping that this is close enough to what would be a rusty done. One of the principles Laysenring used when he tied and fished was that he adjusted the amount of hackle for the volume of water. So thinner water, he would use a thinner hackle. A heavier water, he would use a heavier hackle. I'm going to kind of split the difference. For a thinner hackle, I would just take off all of one side of this feather. For a full hackle, use both sides. So what I'm going to do is take about half of one side, and then take my hackle plier and grab the tip, pull back on everything that the hackle plier didn't grab, and then I'm going to cut that little bit to create just a little triangle, and that little triangle will be my tie-in. I've got this extra hackle in there. Get it away from the eye. And then this is a long enough feather. I think I can just use my fingers, otherwise put a hackle plier on it. But pull back on all the fibers as I wrap them. I've got a couple that got stuck. Bring my hackle underneath of those. Pull back on all the hackle barbs till I have just the stem left, and then I can wrap up over the stem. I'll do 3 wraps over the top, and then I'll pull that stem, or it's called a rachis, back and wrap up over it. And I may be able to just snap that out. Yeah, it works better if I can snap it out. It's much cleaner. And I still have a fairly full wet fly hackle. I'll put a whip finish on that. Just push my scissors against the thread to get rid of it. I do have a few little, looks like probably muskrat fibers. I use a diluted goop. Stick my needle in my jar, grab a drop of that diluted goop and put that on the head of the fly. Let that soak in. It does look a little darker right now while it's wet, but it will dry clear. And then I can take a hackle tip and push it through the eye of the hook to make sure I've got room for a tippet.